Okay, so here we have a very popular theory of motivation used in marketing, and it's like if you are taking any marketing 101 preliminary marketing class, you will encounter Maslow's hierarchy of needs, especially in conjunction with the chapter that covers needs, demands, values, and um, needs, demands, values, wants, right? So in essence, marketing is about influence. And so, why is this model so popular? So, if you ever wondered what motivates people to act the way they do, a famous psychologist named Abraham Maslow might have a few pointers for you. So he believed that there are five levels of human needs that drive behavior. And from basic ones at the bottom, your food, shelter, clothing, your basic needs, to more complex ones, such as a need for love and fulfillment. And so he argued that the lower needs are prerequisites for the highest, which he called self actualization, which is just a fancy word for finding your purpose. Um, and so he believed that humans are naturally drawn to achieving their true potential. So let's talk about it. Here we are, looking upward from the base to the pyramid to its top. The five needs identified by Maslow are psychological needs: safety, love and belongingness, self-esteem, and self-actualization. But let me just mention that this model is a westernized version of a model um, that was an indigenous model um, that Abraham Maslow um, adapted. So in the original one, it was more communal, um, collectivist society. So in this one, it's more the individual person. So so you have to realize that this has um, a tinge of Western culture, colonialist world viewpoint, and understand that that's a part of it. That's a part of it. So that they won't mention that in your textbook. So yes, let's just continue. Um, the order of the hierarchy of needs is not random and suggests that the pyramid would collapse if the lower levels are precarious. So some of these needs are non-negotiable, as one who has been hungry or sleep deprived has noticed. And so while others tend to be more robust, allowing one to pursue the upper needs, even if the lower ones have not been met completely, you'd rather watch a video explaining them. I can show you one in class, but this we'll look at some key takeaways from this pyramid. So yes, you need your fundamental baseline needs to be met before you can move on to the other needs. However, it's not entire. I know the presumption is that you need one layer of needs to be met before you move on to the next, but this may not necessarily be so in all cases, and there's a lot of debate around this, right? And let's look at the psychological needs. So the first set of needs are the most basic and shared by other animals as well, and they ensure the survival of the individual. And more broadly, the species tend to occupy our minds completely when they are not met. And so, what falls into this category? Hunger, thirst, the need for sleep, and all other bodily functions. And so, uh, if you taken a ecology class and you learned about this idea of homeostasis, you can think about that. Everything that keeps a person in homeostasis. Safety needs. Once the physiological needs are met, the individual seeks shelter, And then this could be like physical shelter or psychological shelter, but physical shelter, we'll talk about that. This is the need that spurs in us the desire for a literal roof over one's head, but also for a figurative one. So it also explains why we have more peace of mind when we have secured stable employment, have a savings account, why we buy insurance. From this level onward, needs fall onto a spectrum. The definition of safety is somewhat fluid and varies from one individual to another, while hunger doesn't really leave any room for interpretation. The next one is love and belongingness. The third need in the hierarchy pertains to the human as a social animal. It propels us not only to pursue a partner, but instills in us the desire to be around friends and family, to be part of a social group. And it's kind of interesting because we don't like to think of ourselves as human animals. But I know that here at Galen, we take anthropology, and in a sense, we are. And early in our evolution, it's very much instilled in all of us, is the idea that we are social animals, that we are kind of like pack animals. And so without this community or the pack, if we are isolated, we are in danger. So we have that in our psyche, like this idea that rejection and abandonment is actually a very primal kind of fear. Um, and so we need this sense of belongingness in order to thrive. Um, we have to be around friends and family to belong to groups of people with similar characteristics and interests. Okay, so when we're young, we look at ourselves from the outside in. As we become more self aware, we look at ourselves from the inside out. But until we get to that sense of self awareness, we look to other people to have an idea like how are we behaving? Is the way that we're behaving falling into social norms? Um, we seeking validation and this kind of thing? So a word of warning: this doesn't mean this doesn't this need is not met unless love flows in both directions. So according to Maslow, every individual wishes to be loved and accepted, but also to feel love for others. Self-esteem. So once an individual has satisfied his or her lower level necessities, needs pertaining to the self start to surface. And this is also in conjunction with a person becoming more self aware, right? Um, so when we're babies or like in toddlerhood, when you're children, we have this idea that we don't see ourselves as separate from our primary caregivers. That's why we have think they like separation anxiety. The more that we grow, depending if our development hasn't stagnated in some stage, we get a little bit more independence, we get more awareness of ourselves. But once we get a very deep awareness of ourselves, we start to have a greater need for self esteem. The first of these is a longing for self esteem and self confidence as a byproduct of it. So you cannot have self esteem without first being aware of oneself and for one's effort to be recognized by others. And this drive manifests as a need to feel like what we do is useful and valuable to the world. And self actualization is having gained the respect of others. The individual turns inward, begins to seek their higher purpose. There's an actual term in Japanese called ikagai, which is very an interesting one that has to do with finding your purpose. And maybe if I have time, I'll talk to you about that. It may not seem like there's a big difference between this level and the previous one. So here's what distinguishes them. there are multiple things that we do and what we're good at, which are valuable to the world, but don't feel like a calling. So if your grandmother would define self-actualization, she'd say, the thing that you've been put on this earth to do. And many people consider this like something work related, but it does not necessarily have to be work related. A painter is going to paint, a writer is going to write. Even if your goal is to be, for example, a good parent, then you achieve your purpose. And this is the pinnacle of human endeavors in the level that we strive to climb up. Um, so what is interesting about this is that I told you Maslow's hierarchy derived from a previous indigenous model um, by Native Americans, and in their one, the end goal wasn't self actualization, but it's passing the culture onwards, or passing your knowledge on to the community, and cultural perpetuity, I think, is what the term is, right? So this model was is kind of appropriated to the Western culture. So you can it's just an interesting tidbit. Self actualization. Interesting thing about this. Um, how does this relate to marketing? Well, marketing, we use Maslow's hierarchy of needs to use influence strategies in order to pretty much to convince people to buy our product or service. So we appeal to what we refer to in marketing terms as their pain points. And so these depending on what stage a person is, that would mean we would um, use different influence strategies to appeal to uh, different target audience members according to what motivates them. It's really interesting. What's interesting about self actualization is if you feel fulfilled, if you feel fulfilled, um, your wants decrease. It's really hard to sell to a self-actualized person. It's really interesting. So Maslow, he uses the term deficiency needs to describe the four lowest levels of the pyramid. So the lower order needs, and at the top we have higher order needs. Um, so this dichotomy is based on how fulfilling these needs affect motivation. Once the deficiency is gone, the motivation to pursue the needs also disappears, while in the case of the growing needs, satisfying the needs only serves to increase the appetite. So failing to fulfill the growth needs comes without the desired side effects, but ignoring the deficiency needs puts us in danger. Isn't that interesting how that works? Um, okay. So, does everybody reach self actualization? I think that's kind of a lofty goal. Um, each person and every person is capable of reaching self actualization. I suppose they just need to trust themselves, ensure that that they're constantly asking themselves questions, that they are open to really start embracing their purpose, right? So, yes, interesting. I don't want to go on. I feel like I've been kind of rambling a little bit on this one. So I'll end here.